People who started their day with a cup of coffee and reading the morning paper. None of them expected that this would be their last day here.
It feels like the sadness is tangible everywhere in Boulder, all around Boulder.
I think my biggest regret is just her not being able to do what she wanted to do anymore. That was taken from her.
He cared about this community, and he was willing to die to protect others.
The killer, his name, that will live in infamy. But today, let us remember the victims.
Boulder has lost not just lives, but the love of 10 wonderful people. People that we're just beginning to know today, hearing about their dreams, about their achievements, about their legacies that live on through their families and friends' stories. 10 lives in a community that prides itself on knowing each other well. And neighbors came out today. They just came and came with the flowers and the cards and the signs and the unspoken thoughts. A moment ago, a young girl with her mother carrying a stuffed bear and a handwritten note. People came out today in such numbers that they were often only separated on the sidewalk by the distance that we have built into our lives during this pandemic. They came out to remember 10 Coloradans killed on a cloudy Monday afternoon at the grocery store. One of them a Boulder police officer who rushed in as others rushed out. The suspect did not appear to offer anything by way of an explanation when police took him into custody. He's facing murder charges. The sequence of events is becoming more clear today. First 911 calls came in at 2:32 p.m. Suspect was in custody about 50 minutes later. The youngest victim, 20 years old. The oldest, 65. None students at CU Boulder. Our Steve Stager remembers each of the 10 lives lost.
Ricky Olds was 25, the front-end manager of the King Soopers. Her uncle says she was a strong and independent woman, changed her hair color nearly every week. She was loving and hardworking. Suzanne Fountain was 59, remembered for her work in Boulder's theater community. She was an incredible actress, her former stage mates said. Terry Leiker was 51. One of her former colleagues told me she was a courtesy clerk at that King Soopers, and always a nice person. On Twitter, Lexi Knudsen said she got to know Terry through CU's Best Buddies program. Lexi called Terry the most innocent, loving, and caring individual that the world held. Kevin Mahoney was 61, a father. His daughter Erica said she's thankful her dad got to walk her down the aisle last summer. He was going to be a grandfather. Erica wrote her dad represents all things love. Jody Waters was 65. Her good friend shared this photo this morning. Said looking at it today reminds him of what a positive light she was. Her friend Scott said Jody was a fashion designer looking to open her own boutique. She was a beautiful soul, he said, a warm person with light in her eyes. Officer Eric Talley was 51, an 11-year veteran of the Boulder Police Department. If you Google his name, you'll find a story from a local newspaper in 2013 about Talley rescuing ducklings from a sewer drain. Talley has 7 children, the youngest age 7. There are still other stories yet to be told. Also lost in this tragedy, 20-year-old Denny Stong, 23-year-old Nevin Stanisic, 49-year-old Trelona Bartkowiak, and 62-year-old Lynn Murray. So all of this is what we've been able to gather from friends and family of the victims talking to them today. The Boulder Police Department is now working with all of those families with liaisons for the media so that they can get the stories of each victim out into the public effectively, Kyle. So we hope to hear a lot more of those stories in the coming days.
All the respect in the world, Steve, for the way that Boulder PD is handling that. And we've, in fact, heard that from some of the families about they appreciate the care and the concern and this liaison model that we saw following the Aurora Theater shooting so that these families don't have to deal with all kinds of inquiries from people in the community, including journalists. They've got a single point of contact to share what they want, when they want.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's the worst phone call you can possibly make, just trying to get information about someone. So this makes that process a little bit easier. And like you said, there may be some things that, or some people that they don't even want to share. This gives them the opportunity to talk through someone else, someone we're used to dealing with, and get that story out there.
A bit of control for these families in the worst of moments. All right, Steve Staker, thank you very much. Mass shootings are thankfully rare. They loom larger in our mind, I think, both due to the attention that we give them and also just the utter senselessness of this kind of public violence. Yet we've made a decision as a society that we will at least prepare our schools and those in our schools on how to best react in a situation like this. And there are public safety experts that wish that more of us would do the same. Here's Marshall Zellinger.
Walking down the aisle with your cart, what do you notice? $5 teas and tanks? Yeah. An information kiosk? Sure. How many of you spotted the exit sign attached to the ceiling panel?
We all get so used to them, they don't show up on our cognitive radar. We just don't see them. So get in the habit of looking for those when you go somewhere.
Pete Blair is Executive Director of ALERT, the Advanced Law Enforcement Rapid Response Training Center based at Texas State University. ALERT teaches civilian response to active shooters. You've likely heard of run, hide, fight. ALERT's training is similar, but it's called avoid, deny, defend.
If you're hearing run, hide, fight, make sure that that middle term hide does not mean to you duck under a desk and hope that they don't find you. That's not a good strategy. If you can avoid the attacker, you want to do that. If for some reason you can't get away from the attacker, say you're in an office and you hear gunfire in the hallway, the next best thing is to deny access to your location to keep them from getting to you. And the last resort is to defend yourself, which is if you find yourself in close proximity to the attacker, you couldn't avoid, you couldn't deny access, you need to defend yourself.
Let's go back into the store. It's not always as simple as seeing the exit signs leading to another exit sign leading to the emergency exit. Sometimes it's just noticing a doorway you've overlooked.
We don't want people to live their life in fear that this is going to happen at any moment and they should be afraid to go out of the house. It's unlikely to happen. And so if you spend just a few seconds getting used to that and getting used to when I walk into somewhere, I just look and I identify the exits and I have an alternate plan about where I would go if this were to happen. It's just a simple habit to get into and it gives you a lot of options if you do find yourself in that circumstance.
Following the Aurora Theater shooting, movie theaters started putting slates up warning to look for your closest emergency exit either before or after the previews. The movie screen version of that in a big box store, though, Kyle, is looking for the exit signs that just seem to blend into the mundane.
You know, Marshall, I think that there are all kinds of people in Colorado for one reason or another who understand that you can build some public safety awareness into your day without it becoming cumbersome. I think of, you know, folks who live in a neighborhood where they don't always feel comfortable or a domestic violence situation. I mean, heck, you could probably ask just about any woman in Colorado what it's like to build public safety into their day-to-day routine. There are little habits that you can learn that just become part of second nature.
And if you want official training, that group ALERT trains the trainer. So there are people, law enforcement in Colorado, I know the FBI got trained last summer to then go in by request to Rotary clubs, to church groups, to neighborhood organizations and train on those 3 steps of alert, deny, and defend.
If training and awareness is something that will make you feel better and not worse, it's good to know that it's out there. Marshall, thank you very much. More than one of Colorado's state legislators is there at the Capitol because of the fact that gun violence stole someone in their life. It was an emotional morning at the Capitol today. Democratic State Senator Rhonda Fields of Aurora asked her colleagues a question.
We just had a mass shooting in Atlanta at a day spa. People just minding their business. Where are we safe? Are we safe in our schools? Our kids are having to participate in these shooting lockdown drills because you never know when crazy or madness might show up. Where are we safe? Are we safe at a grocery store?
Fields' son, Javad, and his fiancée, Vivian Wolf, were both murdered shortly before Javad was to testify at a murder trial. Rhonda Fields was elected to the state legislature before the theater shooting in her district that took the lives of 12 Coloradans. We're going to briefly now discuss the shooter by name. It's important that anybody in the community who has had a concerning interaction with this person knows who the suspect is so that they can talk to investigators. 21-year-old Ahmad Alaliwi Alyssa is from Arvada. He was transferred to the Boulder County Jail earlier today after he spent the night in the hospital getting treated for a leg injury. He's facing 10 counts of first-degree murder. Police are not saying anything at this point about a possible motive. Investigators say that he bought a Ruger AR-556, it's a semi-automatic rifle, back on March 16th. NBC News is reporting that several law enforcement sources have said that the suspect appears to have a history of mental health problems. Only criminal charge that we could find in his past was a misdemeanor assault charge from 3 years ago when he punched a fellow student at Arvada West High School. President Biden spoke about America's latest mass shooting this morning, which happened before flags were raised from our last mass shooting outside Atlanta, Georgia. The president repeated his calls for the Senate to make so-called assault weapons illegal in America again, and he repeated his calls for America to adopt the type of more stringent background checks that Colorado already has.
The Senate should immediately pass, let me say it again, the United States Senate, I hope some are listening, should immediately pass the 2 House-passed bills that close loopholes in the background check system.
Democrats control both the House and the Senate, but by a thin margin, and with some centrist Democrats concerned about gun control proposals and the Republicans' ability to force a 60-vote threshold, it's not clear where those ideas are going. Let's talk now about what we can do together as a community to help Boulder heal, specifically how we can help the families who lost someone that they love. The Boulder County Crisis Fund has been specifically set up to support those directly affected as well as the greater community as they process this tragedy. We're launching our Word of Thanks micro-giving campaign a little early this week to support the Boulder County Crisis Fund. The victims' families and others impacted will have immediate needs that can be met by this crisis fund, but we also know that the effects of what happened here will be felt for years in Boulder. The nonprofit Community Foundation Boulder County has a decades-long track record in this community. They have partnered with the city of Boulder and a number of smaller nonprofits to operate this crisis fund in support of the victim's family and the greater community. You have been asking us since yesterday afternoon how you can help, and we know that there are a lot of good ideas out there. The Boulder County Crisis Fund, run through the Community Foundation, we know is going to be here in the long term for this community with a track record of results in the past. If you text the word thanks to 303-871-1491, I'll send you that link to donate, or you can find it anywhere that you find Next online. Listen, you know that a lot of good people contributing $5 adds up quickly to do tremendous good in our community. As always, I'll match the first 50 donations of $5 to get things rolling tonight. Boulder is hurting right now, hurting in a way that so many, too many communities in Colorado have over the past decades. The Crisis Fund will be able to help the victim's family and this community for years to come. We've seen this before in Colorado. We have even heard people refer to this as a new normal. So much so we know it is not new. In a moment, our Chris Vanderveen, who has spent his lifetime in this state, asks a difficult question. Is this who we are? And we'll take a moment for one of your questions on another topic, about what's happening to Colorado's unused vaccine doses. That's next. Ten lives lost at this grocery store, 12 more in a movie theater, 13 in a high school. For all that this state has to be proud of, we cannot seem to stop adding to our place in America's history of mass shootings. Our Chris Vanderveen, Colorado born and raised, has some thoughts about that.
Words don't come easy on a day like this. They elude, they evade, at a time when I so desperately need them. If only I could search my head to find one or two to describe the thoughts that rattle the soul and shake the faith. One or two to search a hole so deep its bottom remains unseen. As a writer, I'm supposed to use words, the right words, even amid so much wrong. Words heal and inspire, and yet today the ones I find so close do neither. And maybe that's okay, because as I sit down and write these words, inadequate, insufficient words, I'm left with the simplicity of a moment like this. A moment we here in Colorado know all too well. A moment when once again we are left to wonder why. Why? Even in the absence of an answer to that question, we can find the hint of a truth. These feelings we're feeling, we felt before. Don't suggest to me this is not who we are. Because in a state that's seen this before, so many times before, this is precisely who we are. Not you or I, but we, all of us, own this. And once we realize that, maybe finally we can move past the insufficiencies and the inadequacies of words and discover the time to battle this with little more than empty words is over.
Tonight's next question comes from Deb. After seeing a news story last week about wasted vaccine doses, relatively few in Colorado, Deb was wondering how they're disposed of. Do unused doses literally go down the drain? It's a really good question. So the state health department knows of 882 vaccine doses which could not be delivered. And we told you that a good bunch of them, like 300 or so, were lost in a single incident when a storage unit failed down in Pueblo. UC Health tells us that in its system, they only have recorded 2 wasted doses. In those cases, the unusable doses were disposed of in one of those pharmaceutical waste containers, which is then incinerated so it doesn't end up down the drain or in a landfill. Let's talk about hope, shall we? Let's talk about vaccines. 15.3% of our state population is all set right now. More than 884,000 people. 519,000, about 9% of the population, is waiting on a second dose. And the thing that we'll always remind you is that 20% of the state's population is under the age that is approved for vaccines. Keep watching our positivity rate, which is creeping up. It was at 5.8% yesterday. That's above what's considered the acceptable 5% mark, and our 7-day average has now been pulled up to 4.2%. We're back in a moment with another remembrance and a final word from Boulder. Young man just walked by on the sidewalk. He's handing out flowers to his neighbors, just simply as an act of love and kindness. Colorado has proven itself to be quite good at remembrance. Today we add 10 more names to the list. May they be the last.